Welcome back to the Witch Wars podcast. I'm Krys Copeland, co-author of Witch Wars Defense Manual Part 2, and with me is the original fire starter himself, Ed Hubbard, author of the first Witch War Defense Manual and co-author of the second, and longtime veteran of the battle for integrity in the pagan world. Welcome, Ed.
I'm glad to be back for the second episode. I'm so excited. Last week we got so much feedback about issues that we need to deal with. But I think this week, I guess if I understand it, we're going to look at sources of it. And congratulations on becoming the head of the Order of Survivors, which
Thank
was
you.
started by the beloved sanctified Wendy LaJoy, who served it for many years. And she did a lot of prison ministry. And she is the emotional grandmother of so many of our elders. So that's a great inheritance. And it's some big shoes.
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke with Lady Alyssa about what direction she would like to see, and she was like, Lady Wendy is an active ancestor, so if you want, you can connect with her yourself, and she will guide you in this project. And while I don't necessarily know if I don't ever like to say I'm in contact with a certain entity or a certain energy, because I don't necessarily know if I am or if it's just myself guiding it. But I do feel like the decisions I've been making with it have been very easy to make so far. And so I do feel at least like her energy is definitely guiding this project. And I love where it's going. Like our logo is updated, but it's still an image of Lady Wendy. But at her as in her later years, after she survived just a little bit more in life. So we have an updated sigil for it, and we have a Facebook group now. So if you're interested in joining that, if you'd like some support for trauma that you've been through or long-term abuse that you've been through, feel free to join and reach out for help. We do check-ins weekly. We post content every few days, and most of it is focused on mental health and education and self-care.
So I have a quick story for about Lady Wendy.
Awesome.
And about how she became it. When Don first met her, many years ago, we won't age anybody right now, but it was very early in both of their things that she was very much using a walker and she had to stoop back a bit. And she wasn't as sick as she thought, but she was enough sick that she was on a process, just as a lot of people are. She was in her retirement age. She had met Don. Don did some Reiki for her. She got involved. And when she lifted the trauma of just loneliness, of just life, she had wonderful children there. We're not talking about any we're not talking about childhood stuff. We're not talking about any of that, but just the weight we all get. I mean, somebody doesn't realize the minor aggressions against us, the disappointments, not doing what you wanted, feeling like you've been, I should have done that or I shouldn't have done that, all kind of weigh on us and that trauma. And one of the things she did, she accepted that she was going to be an ancestor someday. And she worked to lift her trauma. And she did a lot of Reiki with Lady Virginia, Lady Bitterwind, uh, Lady Crystal. They all worked together. And they brought her to a strong semblance of health. She was so strong until the last couple of months. It was during the COVID period that she was kind of quiet about it. But she always said, working through these traumas and the support, the energy support, and the love of the tradition. More importantly, love of friends she met through the tradition. It's not the tradition that gave it to her. It was the relation. She always pointed out, you don't survive with a tradition. You survive with friends.
Mm-hmm.
And she had these great friends. And so that's one of the reasons why she came back and became so strong in our tradition, because she then became the grandmother. I mean, she became an honest grandmother to everybody, first elder and things like that. I was very honored when she took it from me, and I served for a couple of years after her as first elder again until Lady Alyssa took it over.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's awesome.
And so the lifting of trauma can actually have a very physical effect.
Yeah, it definitely does. I've experienced that in my own life with trauma recovery. The more I talk to people about Lady Wendy, the more and more I regret that I didn't get to meet her while she was here with us in the physical plane. And
Mm.
because everything I hear about her is just such a spirit of not just survival, but also maintaining kindness or developing kindness, even during really abusive situations throughout her life. And her own life seems to mirror in some ways my life. We both have a shared experience of needing to cut off toxic members of our family. We both have experienced different forms of abuse throughout our lives. And we've both just come out of that still trying and hoping that we can be a good person and
Hmm.
that we can share that with the world and that we don't give up on people, even though we have experienced so much in our lives. And I love that you brought that up about abuse, that we all deal with something in our lives, even if we're not, being abused daily or something like that. All of us have experienced those microaggressions. All of us have experienced situations where we were made to feel less than human in our lives. And
Hmm.
I think that we can all connect on that. So we definitely shouldn't be comparing like, oh, well, you wouldn't, what I went through was way worse, or what this person experienced was much easier. That none of that is true. All of it is harmful
None
to
of
our
that's true.
experience. Yeah.
Everybody's experience, just like we are unique human beings with unique skills. I believe everyone's a genius, and I spent my life training people to genius. Right? That it is. And then I had to train them to defend themselves, which was Defense Manual, both of those books. Check it out, to defend themselves.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things I'm very grateful. I've had a number of students, Chris, I'm so glad that she came along and is now taking such a strong position. I love seeing people and then people advance into strong positions. And in that process, I've had to teach people backbones. I mean, Chris already had it, so Chris is a little different. I had to teach her how to be visible, to know that she had a voice. And
Mm.
once she got her voice and knew she had a right to the voice, off. And today we're going to talk. She's going to lead us in this discussion today, right now,
Yeah.
about what we should be doing.
Yeah,
Hmm?
exactly. It actually has to do with that phrase witch war and what it means, because, it's not just about like reputation or drama or spilling the tea on different things in different situations. And it's not this mystical feud that's happening on the astral plane. Witch war is just another word for abuse. It's an attack on another human being, emotionally, spiritually, sometimes even physically or financially, a lot of times financially. And it's not metaphorical harm, it's real, and it happens way too often in our pagan spaces. Do you have any opening thoughts on that, Ed?
So let me go ahead and one more, and why this applies to much more. I also believe witch wars exist in office. Anytime somebody's going to be made into a scapegoat or abused by a group based on non-real or what we call spectral evidence, let's call it what it is, evidence that cannot be proven. You've got a witch war. It doesn't matter if they're witches, because the original witch wars didn't go after witches. They went after women. They went after victims.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
exactly.
when you talk about witch hunts, we're not talking about real witches. We're talking about the person we're going to maim all our sins against. And I think that's an important part, and that's really abusive. And the trick of it for the abuser, and I guess you're going to point it out, let me tell you why they do it. Everybody always asks me, well, why do they do it? So there's a part of our brain that has a hunting mechanism. And if we were hungry, and if you're hunting for food, there's a moment where you pleasure for the hunter to kill an animal to bring food back to the home, right? And then that was a
Mhm.
very normal human reaction. In today's world, that's kind of got warped into some chemistries, and it was always dangerous. I mean, we have always had dangerous people, let's be honest.
Mm.
But the idea of, because we use verbal, we now have this emotional body, which is verbal reputation, because we have an outside force called the police, other people. We're not allowed to go take somebody out and throw them into a duel.
Yeah,
Neighborhoods, few cultures, but overall. So the only way we really fight is verbally.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
it,
tricks.
it's great that
Hmm?
you brought up like why the abuser does this. Obviously, in the end, it doesn't matter why they do it. They if
But
they've
it is a
caused harm, they
personal
caused
thrill.
harm. Yes. But most abusers are often former victims themselves.
For
Not all
sure.
of them, but the majority of them. So the
For
best
sure.
way we can stop abuse from happening is by one, making sure that there is justice when it does occur, that there is protection for the victim so that they don't then join that cycle and become an abuser themselves. And two, we just prevent them from being abused in the first place. And we especially need to do this in any spaces where there are children, but we do need to also have some protective measures, and even for adults in our community, so that they feel that they are protected and feel safe in our spaces.
Agreed. So
Yeah.
how do we do that?
Well, the first thing we need to do is figure out like what abuse is. What does it look like? How do we recognize it? So we're using the term witch wars, but really it's finding those specific behaviors that people practice when they are being abusers. And I've created this document. I'm going to share it here with you, and I've already shared it with you earlier, but I'll share it with you here
And
as
for
well
those
as. Mhm.
and for those that are listening by the podcast, we'll put a connection into the notes. Hmm?
Yeah, exactly. I will have this available, and you can also join the Facebook group for the Order of Survivors, and this is also on the Facebook group. So here you can see that we have six different types, or sorry, five different types of abuse recognized, and then the sixth box here is just a reminder that abuse is never your fault. It's never the victim's fault. So first off, what kinds of abuse do we see, especially in witch wards and pagan communities? This resource is from the Correllian Order of Survivors. And we don't want to dismiss the types of abuse we see as conflicts in the community. So the first one, physical abuse, we'll start with that. It's harming the sacred vessel is what we refer to it as. This is pretty rare in open spaces like in festivals, but it is still present. You may not see direct hitting or punching or physically attacking people, but you might see yelling or physical threats or pushing into people's personal spaces. So if you see those behaviors, that's when it's appropriate to step in and calm that situation down to diffuse that situation. And have you ever seen examples of this when you're working security at pagan events?
Well, I never worked security because the
Okay.
festival security are trained people, and I know a number of them, and I respect them. But have I seen it? Sure, yelling, that sort of thing. Now, one of the things that I will say, the guards at like Starwood, Heartland especially, if they see this, they will break it up. But you get it. And the bullying, now that's that sort of physical bullying, like it annoys me, like you're allowed to punch somebody on the shoulder because it's a good game, especially amongst the teenagers. I don't like it, but I see that type of microaggression. Have I seen full-fledged couples get into real situations? Sure. Hmm?
Mm, yeah.
And let me be honest with you, in a lot of women's circles, and I'm only privy on second and third hand information. Okay, so I'm not a reliable witness. But in a lot of the women's groups in the red tents, also will identify women who have bruises and things like that and help them. I mean,
Mm,
I know there have been plans escape from marriages or abusive situations through festivals on the very positive side through the Red Tent program. Now, I'm not a reliable witness on that. I'm not going to say that I am, but I've heard these experiences that make me joyful. Hmm?
I've heard similar things. I've not been in a red tent festival yet, but I hope to attend one day. One of a festival that has one of these, and yeah, it would be. I would love to hear more stories like that coming out of this, because and it doesn't even necessarily have to be abuse. If you see strange bruising on someone, it could be a medical thing. You don't know, but it's a good thing to just check and ask and make sure they're okay. They may not have noticed it if it is a medical thing, and it may alert them to that
Sure.
situation. And of course, like Ed says, if it's abuse, then that's this is a chance for them to get out of that situation. So it's great to hear those stories of coming out of abusive situations in that manner.
But I will tell you where I've seen most physical abuse.
Mm.
And it's those small private covens that meet in basements, back of stores, where there's far fewer people. I mean, so festivals, you're on your best behavior, and that abuse gets blunted. It may be there. We've got some ways of dealing with it, but in the coven, oh no, I've seen a lot of physical abuse within the coven structure. That's the most dangerous space for these types of things happen. When it's positive and useful and good, it's like the most wonderful energy. So I don't want to talk against it. I run a coven called Black Moon Coven. I mean, and that's all very uplifting and everything else. But when it goes south, especially ones that are attracting publicly, you have to watch for it because one of the old Gardnerian tricks, oh, you have to sleep with the head priest to get advanced.
Yeah.
Oldest trick in the book, very nasty. So in that coven situation, I think one of the rules I saw earlier, you never leave the children alone. You should never be
Mhm.
alone with these early covenanters until you really get
Yeah.
to know them. That you've made your
It's the
proper bond.
constellation rule, we call it. The constellation
Is
rule.
that what it's
Yep.
called? Okay. I know very little about the actual, so I know a lot about how to fight these battles.
Mhm.
I know very little about how to help the victims, and I've been very, very fortunate in my life to have people like Lady Wendy LaJoy and others that I can pass them on to.
Well, I tell
'Cause-
you, this is a great conversation to have about that because the first real sometimes people don't even realize they're being abused. They might think that they're in a
Mhm,
perfectly normal situation. I will tell you that as a child and into early adulthood, I thought that it was perfectly normal to come home from school and get hit every day. I thought that was what everybody went through because in my community most kids did go through that. That was a
mhm,
normal thing. And when I grew up and when I met people who had never been hit by their parents ever and came out as like a very high functioning, very successful adults, I was like, oh, this is something that might have caused me issues in life. And that's something that I need to look at. And a lot of it was learning that it was a form of abuse in
mhm.
college when I was studying to be a teacher.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And I've learned that a physical abuse actually causes brain damage to children. So you might call
Mhm,
it discipline in your home, but literally every time you hit that child, you're lowering their IQ points. So if that's something
mhm.
that you practice in your home, and I know a lot of pagans out there do, please do some research on that. Please really find out what's going on. I know a lot of parents are doing it because they think they're being good parents. They think they're instilling discipline in their child, but it's not really helping. And it can cause a
And that's
lot of
gonna be,
problems.
and that's where the generational comes in. My daughter's our family sealer. I did some of it, but I also, and so so in my family, one of the things I've learned now in older age that me and my daughter have reconciled because she's taken a lot of therapy.
Mm.
She had a lot of issues. I was not a physical abuser in any way. I was poor, that sort of thing. But because I was so physically beyond, I mean, I am the poster child of an abuse child when younger, that I did inflict emotional trauma on my poor daughter. It's taken years. And now she's trying to keep both of those things off my grandchildren. So it's curable, but it is a lifelong battle sometimes for some. It is so,
Oh,
and you
I
have
get
to,
it. I was a yeller, so yeah, absolutely,
yeah.
I understand it. It's something that we learn, and
Mhm,
it's something that I saw recently on the show The Last of Us on I
mhm,
believe it's HBO Max.
mhm,
In that there's a scene, a generational scene where a father is telling his son, I was a little bit better than my father, and I hope that you're a little bit better than me. And then at
mhm.
some point, he says the same thing to his foster daughter in the show. And, every generation just gets a little bit better. So that's what we need to hope for. And that's when we need to work for.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So emotional abuse. I see that on the list.
Yeah. Emotional boost. Yeah, that's actually what you were talking about with the yelling or with the name calling or maybe belittling. Those are different things. Even gaslighting, unnecessary criticism, or inappropriate situations of giving criticism. Maybe it's someone yelling at someone who has messed up in the coven. Maybe they did something really wrong and the priestess or the priest is yelling at that person. That is still a form of emotional abuse. No one deserves to get yelled at for making a mistake.
So I think this is one of the most tolerated forms of abuse in our community. So
Oh,
physical
yes.
abuse, we've moved on, and I will tell you, we're doing everything we can. Even in the coven circles, they're stopping it. There's a lot more connection. So
Mhm.
I really do believe in those spaces, physical abuse is lowering.
Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
not saying it's going away, but it is getting, and there's a lot more support.
Yes.
Emotional abuse, oh no, no, because that's all part of the status game in part. I'm better than you. You should be get out of that chair. I see a lot of what we would call uh order
Narcissistic
or
behavior.
status
Yeah.
problems, and that causes a lot of emotional abuse. I see it all the time. Um, which, in some of the award ceremonies, there's this emotional abuse. That's I'm going to do the festival. You should bow to me because I'm going to give you guys awards. I've
Yeah.
seen that sometimes. And you see a lot of behaviors that are emotional abuse, name
Yeah.
calling, young witch. So can you tell us a little bit? How can you recognize you're being emotionally abused? Because I feel like that's the number one that most people get exposed to.
Well, emotional abuse abuses your emotions. So, are you in those moments feeling anger or hurt? Or so usually it's this feeling of like you've been slapped across the heart, basically.
Hmm.
And if you're feeling that, it does require being like very in touch with your emotions, being able to sense that. If you're not good at just recognizing oh, I feel anger, or oh, I feel sadness, feel see if you can feel like a tightening in your chest when the situation is happening. You might feel your heart start beating faster. Look for those physical signs that you are not okay emotionally,
Hmm.
and that you want to get out of there. And the first thing to do is just remove yourself from that situation. You cannot react in a way that is appropriate if you are also in a heightened emotional state. Clearly, the person you're dealing with is trying to evoke emotions, or maybe not intentionally trying to, but they've done something to evoke your emotions. You need to get out of that situation so you can calm down and analyze it and figure out what it was. Was it something they said? Was it the tone of their voice? But you need to be able to calm down and think through those things. So just remove yourself from the situation however you can. That's the best advice that I have in those moments. It also prevents continued abuse from that person in that moment.
So let's go ahead. I've been, and also see here financial abuse. Let us talk about that.
Yeah, so turning to financial abuse, this is like pressuring people for donations. And I don't mean asking for it like in a commercial break. If it's a standard like procedure that people do,
Sure.
then that's fine. But if it's like all the time, multiple times throughout the show, or multiple times throughout the presentation, that they're like shoving the donation plate in your hand, if you feel like you are in a Southern Baptist church on a Sunday morning, that's when you want to like have those red flags go up in your mind. If there are mandatory offerings in particular, if you're required to give money and you don't see that it's being spent on what you expect it to be spent on, then ask questions about that. And if you have to pay for any kind of like a spiritual, pay an exorbitant amount for any type of spiritual service.
So
Also, anything about requiring an attendance at any expensive retreats to stay part of that coven, that's a huge red flag. And demanding financial loyalty while not offering any transparency on where your money is going.
And that's not just pagan community. So I see this abuse in what we call the coaching community. This
Mm-hmm.
is really rampant in the coaching community where they're charging big bucks for these sessions and we'll turn you into a life coach. I
Yeah.
mean, I think some of this investigate, again, investigate. I see that with now a lot. So I've seen this also. You want to get another one? It's called multi-level marketing. Okay, that's a big financial abuse. To join our group, you have to sell these cookies,
Yes.
right? And if
Amway,
you don't sell,
Tupperware, all of those.
yeah, sort of things like that. I've seen it with Avon. I've seen it in all sorts of things in a very commercial world, not just religiously, but also on these sort of worlds. And once they get you in there, they will emotionally abuse you to keep buying. Like, you didn't make your quota. Oh, that's so terrible. And they will also, they're not so much physical abuse, but the physical abuse is they keep sending you products even though you try to
Mm-hmm.
reject it. And that's a financial, and that I hate to say it, it's not emotional. That's physical abuse to your money and your things. So it's not just religious in this, but these sort of cult-like sales organizations. If you see it at work, you say, "Oh, you need another certification," and they send you off to school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you have to get it, and then they find out the school is really like nothing. Yeah, certifications that their friends are running. So you see this type of abuse in a lot of different places, but in the pagan community, I think that if you're subscribing monthly or giving a monthly donation, that's wonderful. We want you to do that. If every week you're being told, we need $50 for us to have this ceremony for you, I'm not so open to that. But steady open payments, like subscriptions, I want to tithe, I want to help, and then have the board say, "Oh, thank you," and then have that recorded so you can see that as that's healthy. So if you
Yeah.
can't see the books, question the group.
And always ask around if like if you are paying for certain services or certain products, ask around and see what other people are paying for similar products and services. Is
Right.
this the standard for the industry? Is this the norm, or are they charging blatant prices? Are they charging secret fees that are added on afterwards? um, just be really careful about how you spend your money
Hmm.
and who you spend it with.
So I see the last two are sexual abuse and spiritual abuse, but I feel like they are a subject that we need to do a whole show on. Hmm?
Yeah, those are in particular sexual abuse can be a lot of things besides just sexual assault. There are other types of abuse that happen in that, and there are layers to it. And consent is a big topic
Oh,
in it
sure.
too.
This is a
Yeah,
yeah,
so I agree with you. I think sexual abuse and
and I think
spiritual abuse is also its own show. I agree
I
with
think
that.
they're tied together.
They
I
can
think
be.
the community is they're very tied together. Hmm?
They can be absolutely. I see sexual abuse and spiritual abuse tied together as well as spiritual and financial abuse. I think those are the
Oh,
two
sure.
major components
And
that I see.
right.
And a lot of
And
this does overlap. A lot of times people are getting abused in multiple ways from the same
so
source.
so why don't we close up on this one about the connection between spiritual abuse and financial abuse? Since we've talked so thoroughly about financial abuse,
Yeah.
what do we see from the spiritual side of that abuse?
With the spiritual side, we're looking more at are they using their titles or their special role in leadership to dispense their own personal karma or justify harm that they're committing? Are they forcing people into spiritual roles or using spiritual roles as an incentive or a bribe? And are they punishing spiritual dissent, like people who disagree with them with exile or curses or other forms of a negative magic thrown their way?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Now I've seen this at scale
Oh yeah.
with financial over many years ago, almost two decades ago, almost everybody's passed away. When a group split up land, they were both investing in this land and they bought it in two pieces. And the second person bought the land by themselves instead of with the group, didn't use the group money. It got to be water rights. The campground never made it
Yeah.
because of these sort of spiritual and financial things put together. They both want to be in charge of this retreat, and they couldn't be.
And with the spiritual and sexual, I think it's also still very much incumbent on the leaders in the situation,
Oh,
especially
sure.
if they're elders, to take responsibility there. If a younger person in the group is hitting on you, if some person who is not qualified to be leading this role is asking you for a position and offering you sexual favors in exchange for it, it's your job to say no to that as a leader in the community. So for leaders out there listening, focus in on that and know that if you're there is a power difference there. The person who has the greater power is the one that is responsible for stopping that situation. Um, do you have anything to add to that, Ed? I know that you've also had experiences with like leaders that you've known that were abusers, sexual abusers in the community that you had to put a stop to.
Sure. And I've had to let me go ahead and do a mea culpa. I had to watch my behaviors.
Mm,
Not because I didn't, I always have believed in being consent-based. But as a young man, I was one of these individuals who cross lines, not to the degree. I mean, I've respected and consent. No is no. Hmm? But it's very hard. If you're male, you need to take a aspect. Have I gone to the edge? Yeah, I have. Hmm? Have I crossed that line? No. At least I don't think it is. No one has said as much. Um, but I have to watch my own behavior. And I think every male needs to look at their own behavior. Where I think I'm most guilty as an individual is how much I've tolerated others'
mm,
bad behaviors. And see, this is the male dilemma. And let me go ahead and tell you as why men should join the order of survivors. It's this moment of where we have these traumas from allowing others doing it. You didn't do it. It's not my fault. It's not my problem. Until it's your daughter, until it's your wife, until it's one of your, children or your best friend's children. And then, oh, wait, I'll kill the bastard. Which, that sort of thing. But they've permitted it. Yeah, that sort of thing. So men have got to look at their own behaviors And women too, and everybody. I
Yeah.
don't care what the gender is, but it's specifically, I'm talking to myself, my own, which is white males with a lot of privilege. We really have to take a look at our own behaviors and really support those, not take over their agendas, not tell them how to do it. No
Yeah.
man's way here, but look, listen, and figure out how to keep yourself from passing those behaviors on. Hmm?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially men in their 20s and in their 30s even struggle a lot with that because they've been taught toxic masculinity over the years. You know, we have glamorized the man who takes by force the woman that he wants in any situation in our movies and our graphic novels and our superheroes. That's what is presented as positive. I mean, look at Indiana Jones. Like he
Hmm.
slept with a 15-year-old student and everybody cheered that.
Oh,
So
sure.
yeah, these idols that we have in our pop culture, that influences young men, and it doesn't help them in realizing what those boundaries of consent are, how to navigate situations with care, and it also pushes young men into sexual situations that they're not ready for. Just like you said, it's not just men who do this. There are women and especially women in leadership roles who often have used their power for
Mhm.
to cause sexual abuse towards people of all genders in the community. And that includes turfdom basically as well. These cis women who believe that the only real women are also cis women and not trans women. That's just simply not true. Our community is welcoming to all women, regardless of what they were assigned as at birth. And that's just standard in our community. Um,
Oh, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
when we start getting cyborgs, I mean, are we going to face this again? I mean, I'm looking at having to have cybernetic implants somewhere in the next 10 years. They're advanced enough. I mean, pacemaker and other things. I mean, we start with that, but what if I decided I wanted to have, that sort of, change my fluidity,
Mhm.
whatever it is. I mean, I might want to, call this, that sort of thing. We're going to be facing a lot more of this in the future.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that through these witch wars, it's not to develop ways to defend ourselves, but more in ways to build sanctuary spaces for people so that we can actually preserve as much of this as we can in the coming storm to come. And that's why we're doing this. Hmm?
Yeah, absolutely. That and one of those sacred spaces that we are forming or have formed, reformed, is the Order of Survivors. So if you'd like to join that, our Facebook group is available. It's facebook.com/groups /Corellian Order of Survivors. Yeah. Anything else to add, Ed, before we close out?
So I think people, so I want to talk about next week. I think people are feeling a little power. After the last few shows, we've really kind of showed what's out there. And I think people need a little bit. So next week, we're going to give you some tools, kits, weapons, whatever you want to call them, to defend yourself. Hmm? I think we really need to kind of do that. And I think I'm look very excited to show things that are out of the book and maybe some techniques you don't know about. And then I think following that, we go back and do the sexual and the spiritual abuse. I think we need to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's where we'll leave it for today. We've talked about the five bases of abuse and how they show up in our pagan spaces. And next week, we'll go into some real world policies as well as core techniques that every event planner, organizer, temple leader, and coven facilitator should be using to prevent abuse in your space from happening in the first place. And these are not theoretical, these are structural policies and procedures that you can use immediately to create real accountability and safety from the moment that your gates open. Because building a better community means being brave enough to design one where harm has nowhere to hide. We'll see you next time. Blessed be and stay vigilant.